They say that knowledge is power, but what they don't tell you is that the most dangerous knowledge is what people think you don't know. My name is Alexander Chun, and this is the story of how I discovered that my trusted business partner was systematically destroying everything I'd built, and how I used his own greed and arrogance to orchestrate the most satisfying corporate revenge in Wall Street history. I'm 39 years old, and until 18 months ago, I was living what most people would consider the American dream of financial success. I was the co-founder and chief investment officer of Meridian Capital Management, one of the most successful hedge funds on the East Coast. We managed over $8 billion in assets for some of the wealthiest individuals and institutions in the world, and our track record of consistent returns had made us legends in the investment community. My business partner, Richard Blackstone, and I had built Meridian from nothing over the course of 12 years. We'd started with a small office in Lower Manhattan, 2 computers, and a shared vision of creating an investment firm that could consistently outperform the market through rigorous analysis and disciplined risk management. Richard handled the business development and client relations, while I focused on investment strategy and portfolio management. Our partnership had been incredibly successful from the beginning. Richard was a natural salesman with an Ivy League pedigree and the kind of old money connections that opened doors throughout the financial world. He could charm potential clients at charity galas, country club dinners, and exclusive social events, convincing them to trust us with their wealth based on his reputation and our track record. I was the analytical brain behind our success. I had developed proprietary algorithms and investment models that could identify market inefficiencies and capitalize on them before our competitors even recognized the opportunities. My background in quantitative finance and computer science allowed me to create trading systems that were years ahead of what most firms were using. Together, we'd built Meridian into a powerhouse that consistently delivered returns that made our clients wealthy and our firm incredibly profitable. We'd weathered market crashes, economic recessions, and regulatory changes by staying disciplined and focusing on long-term value creation rather than short-term speculation. But what I didn't realize was that Richard had been systematically betraying our partnership and our clients for over 2 years, using his position and my trust to orchestrate one of the most sophisticated financial frauds I'd ever encountered. The first sign that something was wrong came during our quarterly client review meetings. Richard had always handled most of the client communications, but I'd started noticing discrepancies between the performance reports he was presenting to clients and the actual returns our portfolios were generating. Initially, I assumed these were simple errors or differences in how we were calculating fees and expenses. But as I began paying closer attention to our client communications and financial reporting, I realized that the discrepancies were too consistent and too significant to be accidental mistakes. More troubling was Richard's behavior during our internal strategy meetings. He'd always been confident and decisive, but lately he seemed nervous and evasive when I asked detailed questions about specific client accounts or investment positions. He would deflect my questions or change the subject, claiming that he was handling the administrative details so I could focus on investment strategy. The breakthrough came when I decided to conduct my own audit of our client accounts and discovered evidence of the most sophisticated embezzlement scheme I'd ever seen. Richard had been creating false investment reports for our largest clients, showing them returns that were significantly higher than what their portfolios were actually generating. He was then skimming the difference between the reported returns and the actual returns, moving the stolen money through a complex network of offshore accounts and shell companies. But the scheme was even more elaborate than simple embezzlement. Richard had been using his knowledge of our investment strategies to front-run our trades, buying and selling securities ahead of our large transactions to profit from the price movements our trades would create. He'd been sharing confidential information about our investment positions with outside parties who were paying him for insider information. Most devastatingly, Richard had been systematically undermining our firm's reputation and client relationships to position himself for a hostile takeover of Meridian. He'd been spreading rumors about my competence and reliability to our clients, suggesting that I was becoming unstable and that they should consider moving their assets to a more stable firm that he was secretly planning to launch. The evidence I uncovered revealed that Richard had stolen over $40 million from our clients over the past 2 years, and he was planning to use that money to capitalize his new firm while destroying Meridian and my reputation in the process. But Richard had made a critical error in his planning. He had underestimated my intelligence, my understanding of financial systems, and my ability to trace complex financial transactions. He thought he could manipulate me because I trusted him, but he didn't realize that trust, when broken, can become the most powerful weapon in the financial world. I spent the next 6 weeks conducting the most comprehensive investigation of my career, using every resource at my disposal to document Richard's fraud and build a case that would not only expose his crimes but also protect our clients and preserve everything we'd built together. I hired a team of forensic accountants and private investigators to trace Richard's financial transactions and document his communications with outside parties. I worked with cybersecurity experts to recover deleted emails and financial records that Richard thought he'd destroyed. I coordinated with regulatory authorities to ensure that when I revealed Richard's crimes, the appropriate legal mechanisms would be in place to protect our clients and recover their stolen assets. More importantly, I began building a comprehensive strategy that would not only expose Richard's fraud, but also ensure that he faced the maximum possible consequences for his betrayal. I wanted him to understand that stealing from our clients and betraying our partnership would result in the complete destruction of everything he'd worked to achieve. The confrontation came during our annual client conference, where Richard was planning to announce his departure from Meridian and encourage our clients to follow him to his new firm. Richard had spent months preparing for this conference, coordinating with our largest clients and positioning himself as the stable, reliable partner who could protect their investments from my alleged instability. He was expecting to use the conference as his platform for destroying my reputation and stealing our client base. Instead, I had prepared my own presentation that would turn his moment of triumph into the most devastating exposure of his career. The conference began exactly as Richard had planned. Our conference room was filled with our most important clients, representing over $6 billion in assets under management. Richard delivered his opening remarks with his usual charm and confidence, thanking our clients for their trust and loyalty over the years. Then I stood up to deliver what everyone expected would be a routine presentation about our investment performance and market outlook. Instead, I began by explaining that I'd recently discovered some information about our firm's operations that I thought our clients should know about, especially since it directly affected their investments and their trust in our firm. I then began presenting evidence of Richard's embezzlement scheme, including detailed financial records showing how he'd been stealing from client accounts and creating false performance reports. I explained how he'd been front-running our trades and sharing confidential information with outside parties for personal profit. The room fell completely silent as the evidence of Richard's betrayal was presented to our clients and the most prominent members of the financial community. Richard went white as a sheet and looked like he was going to be sick, while our clients stared in shock and disbelief at the man they'd trusted with their wealth. But I wasn't finished with my presentation. I had also prepared comprehensive documentation of Richard's plans to destroy Meridian and steal our client base. I presented evidence of his communications with potential investors in his new firm, his attempts to undermine my reputation with our clients, and his systematic preparation for a hostile takeover of our business. More importantly, I revealed that I'd already contacted federal regulators and law enforcement authorities about Richard's crimes, and that a full investigation was already underway. I explained that I'd been working with forensic accountants to trace the stolen funds, and that we were confident we could recover the majority of the money Richard had stolen from our clients. The aftermath was swift and devastating for Richard, but incredibly satisfying for our clients and for me. Federal authorities arrested Richard at the conference, charging him with securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence I'd gathered was so comprehensive that he had no choice but to plead guilty to avoid an even longer prison sentence. Richard's reputation in the financial community was completely destroyed. His new firm collapsed before it even launched, and several of his co-conspirators were also arrested and charged with related crimes. The financial press covered the story extensively, portraying Richard as one of the most brazen financial criminals in recent Wall Street history. Our clients, rather than fleeing Meridian as Richard had expected, actually increased their investments with us. They were impressed by my diligence in uncovering the fraud and my commitment to protecting their interests, even when it meant exposing my own business partner's crimes. But the most satisfying aspect of my revenge was the financial consequences for Richard. Because I documented his crimes so thoroughly, federal authorities were able to seize all of his assets, including his homes, his art collection, and his offshore accounts. The The money he'd stolen was recovered and returned to our clients, but Richard was left with nothing except massive legal bills and a prison sentence. More importantly, the civil lawsuits filed by our clients and by Meridian itself ensured that Richard would never be able to rebuild his wealth or his reputation. He was banned from the securities industry for life and faced personal bankruptcy that would follow him for decades. 18 months later, I'm running Meridian more successfully than ever before. The experience of uncovering and exposing Richard's fraud taught me valuable lessons about trust, due diligence, and the importance of maintaining oversight even in the closest business relationships. I've implemented new internal controls and transparency measures that ensure no one person can manipulate our systems or our clients' trust. More importantly, the incident actually strengthened our firm's reputation in the financial community. Our clients and our competitors recognized that I'd been willing to sacrifice my own business partnership to protect our clients' interests, and that level of integrity attracted new clients and new opportunities. I've also used the experience to become an advocate for stronger regulatory oversight and transparency in the investment management industry. I've testified before Congress about the need for better protections against insider trading and embezzlement, and I've worked with industry organizations to develop best practices for preventing the kind of fraud Richard perpetrated. The most satisfying aspect of this experience wasn't the legal victories or the financial recovery. It was the demonstration that integrity and diligence ultimately triumph over greed and deception. Richard thought he could exploit our partnership and our clients' trust to build his own wealth and destroy everything I'd worked to create. But he discovered that betrayal has consequences that extend far beyond immediate financial gain. My investigation into Richard's crimes wasn't just about protecting our clients. It was about demonstrating that the financial industry can police itself when individuals are willing to put integrity above personal relationships and short-term profits. Richard thought he could manipulate me because we'd been partners for 12 years and because I trusted him with the most important aspects of our business. But he had fundamentally misunderstood what it means to be a fiduciary and what it means to have a responsibility to protect other people's wealth. The partner he thought he was deceiving turned out to be someone who was capable of conducting a more sophisticated investigation than any regulatory authority, and who was willing to sacrifice our personal relationship to protect our clients and preserve the integrity of our firm. In the end, Richard learned that you can exploit trust temporarily, but you can't build a sustainable business on the foundation of fraud and betrayal. The partnership he destroyed was built on genuine expertise and client service, and when he chose to betray that foundation, he lost everything that had made his life successful and prestigious. The insider information Richard thought he could use to destroy me became the evidence I used to destroy him. Sometimes the most devastating weapon in the corporate world isn't market manipulation or hostile takeovers. It's simply insisting that people face the consequences of their choices and that integrity matters more than short-term profits. The investigation had revealed the truth, and the truth had delivered the perfect revenge. The complete destruction of everything Richard had worked to achieve, accomplished using his own greed and arrogance against him.